So I love black and white comics. I used to read a ton of manga growing up. I mean, for one, I love, like, the story of manga and, like, the anime manga art style, but I loved, like, the line work and the screen tones. I loved how much you could just, like, suggest with a few lines and some, fills of black and stuff. Like, so good. So, like, growing up, I always wanted, like, screen tones and inking pens, and I always wanted to work on, like, black and white comics. I wanted to be a mangaka. I was that kid. I remember as a kid, like, don't get me wrong, I found it really cool, but I also found it, like, weird when I started reading color comics. I couldn't tell you which ones I started with, but, like, webcomics were definitely where I was more introduced to, like, colorful comics. But yeah, they always seemed weird because I was introduced to comics in a black and white format. So I have, like, a special place in my heart for black and white comics and black and white webcomics. I'll give you some examples of really cool, like, black and white comics because I want to, like, share them with the world. So one of my favorites, and it has inspired, like, a lot of work from me, is King of Thorn by Yuji Ihara, which is a horror sci-fi cool kick-butt manga, which I love. I don't even want to spoil it. It's just so good, the whole thing. And I remember it being pretty short. Like, I read the whole thing. It's not like a super long manga. So yeah, go check it out. Go buy it. It's so good. The cool thing about King of Thorn is that it hardly uses any screen tones. Like, they're there. It uses it for some characters, like, skin tones, and it's used for some, like, shadow and effects. But for the most part, it really utilizes, like, line work and cross-hatching and, like, fills of black. And it's so cool. I've always wanted to, like, do that. And I did. Like, I'll get into that. But yeah, line art goals. Oh my god. And then a webcomic that is black and white, which I adore, is Devil's Candy by Rem. Oh my god, it's so good. It is, like, everything I want between, like, manga and webcomics. So go read it. It's super cute. So I'm here to tell you all the cool things about black and white comics and why you should love them and why you should make them. So number one, they're super easy to print. And by easy, I mean, like, cheap. They're kind of easy because you don't have to account for CMYK. But they're also very inexpensive to make. That's one of the factors that went into me and Bones making Pretty Mouth and the Magpie. We wanted a comic that we could print and sell at cons that was super cost effective because at the time we were also working on Sovereign, which was all color, and we hadn't accounted for any printing stuff. So we were like, let's get something we can actually print. So we went with the black and white comic. And along that same vein, number two, it's a time saver. Because I find, at least for me, coloring comics takes so much longer than just doing black and white. I mean, for obvious reasons, because there's color choice and shading. Anyways, well, I guess there's not always shading with color. You could have, like, a flat colored comic. I'm getting ahead of myself. But that's another reason why for Pretty Mouth and Magpie, we chose black and white, because it's faster to produce. When we put out Pretty Mouth, we were also working on Sovereign, so it was nice to have a black and white comic that wouldn't eat up as much time as Sovereign. And we could work on both of them at the same time. It's obviously really cost effective to do black and white, but I can tell you're not sold. What are some other ways that black and white is great? Okay, so one of the cool things I learned while doing black and white comics is that it puts limits on your work in, like, a really cool way that forces you to get creative. At least for Pretty Mouth, the majority of Pretty Mouth, I tried to avoid using grayscale. It shows up here and there, but for the most part, I just wanted, like, black and white contrast. So I had to make sure that I could represent things with only black and white. So, like, I got to do cool, like, dynamic lighting and cross-hatching and using lines to suggest form instead of, like, value changes. And so yeah, I learned a ton and got some really cool effects just out of, like, limitation. I love really stark black and white contrast. Like, I want to marry it. It's so good. I love that. I love that stark contrast. So good. Okay. And finally, if you work on a black and white comic, you will level up your line work so fast. So, like, I've talked in the past about how graphic design really helped me level up color because it kind of got rid of, it gets rid of all the other, like, elements of drawing so I could just focus on color. Well, Doing a black and white comic kind of did the same thing, but for my line work, where I didn't have to focus on color, I just had to focus on lines. So my line work has like skyrocketed the quality of it so much from doing black and white comics for so long. I highly recommend it. It also keeps you from being dependent on color as a selling point. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with like pretty colors and color comics in general. I love them, as I've talked about before, but it really does force you to focus on your line work instead of hiding behind pretty colors. So, if that's something you want to level up, do your black and white comic. This is all a ruse. I just want people to make black and white comics because I love them so much. And I want to read more. Don't tell anybody. Either way, if you're like me and you want to do tons of comics and work on multiple comics at once, consider doing a black and white comic. Do it. They're the best. I'm not biased at all. Also, if you need a pick-me-up today, please go watch YouTube videos of the baby rhino at the Toronto Zoo, because oh my god, it's so cute. It melts my heart. That's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye!